Hello. So let me ask you guys a question. Have you ever heard, or let me start with a statement. Have you ever heard the statement that over 90% of agents selling final expense fail within their first year of doing business? Have you ever wondered why? Well, that's exactly what we're here to cover today. So welcome. Thank you guys for being here. My name is JD, and this is the DIG Agency. And today I'm joined by my very good friend of the business, Mr. David Heath. David, hello.
Hello.
All right. And today we're going to dive into the details of why agents fail out. And now I've specifically chose Mr. David Heath to cover this topic because for those of you that don't know him, he is actually one of our coaches in our training program for both new and experienced agents. When you join our agency and you want to work in a face-to-face in-person strategy, Mr. Heath is your coach to help guide you through that process to be successful. So I can tell you, I started with the DIG Agency back at the beginning of the year. And then Mr. Heath trained me during that first, I call it the boot camp, like the first week or two of really hitting it hard and getting ready to sell. When you join our agency, we kind of do like a blitz style attack of training where our goal is to get you ready to sell either on the phone or in person within 7 to 10 days, right? And so once you go out into the field, then you have your coach kind of in your back pocket to either you're going to join them in every morning in what we call the daily huddle, or even once you surpass and pass the initial boot camp training, you have them as a resource to call inside the home. I can tell you up until the last moment that I was out into the field, I was calling my trainer, Mr. Heath, on a weekly, if not daily basis, if I was in the house and had a particular question, or maybe I just dealt with a difficult client and I needed a little pick me up, right? Somebody who I could rant to that understood the frustrations of the business. But again, the reason why Mr. Heath is here is because he has experience not only in the field selling himself, but also has experience training other agents to be successful. And in that experience, he's seen people that have won and people that have lost. So today with Mr. Heath, I would like to cover the reasons why those people lose or fail out of the business and what you can do in order to prevent it. So again, Mr. Heath, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today.
Yes, JD. Thank y'all for having me. Hope everybody out there is having a good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time you're watching this. I think one of the biggest things, oftentimes it's a lot of work to get your insurance license. And we always hear that you can make six figures in this business. And that is a true statement. There's nothing false about that at all. You can make multiple and multiple and multiple six figures in this business. But I think the first thing that I see with individuals is they have a unrealistic expectation of the business, basically. And they're going out and looking for gratification, which would be writing policies, money coming into their bank at a large amount right off the bat. Now, we have to understand life insurance is like any other business. You don't just throw something together, put a little mud on it, and it's going to hold firm. We have to build it from the ground up. And I think a lot of times that's not relayed to people when they're being recruited by some companies or talking to someone who is successful. We often forget that we may not have went out and made that good money in year number one. This business is for longevity. The money is made by making it through this business and sticking with it for a long period of time. It's not a get rich quick scheme by any means. And if it were, it would be 90% made it, 10% would fail, right? But we know it's the other way. 90% don't make it in the business and 10% do. So think about that. If you're going to build your own business, can you go out and within 3 months expect it to be returning profit at an amount that will get you six figures a year? Most likely not. And this business, as far as a business model, is really no different than any other business. You have to get your foundation and you build upon that with consistency and persistency. Those are two very important words that I don't feel are talked about enough at the beginning either. The second reason that I have is going to be maybe we're looking at the business through the wrong set of glasses. And let me explain what that means. Oftentimes, when we go into a business, what is the number one thing on our mind? Money, right? Money. Well, this business is a little different, especially as we're dealing in the final expense side of it, because we are dealing with mostly senior citizens who have waited late in life to start thinking about preparing for their final needs. So we need to go into the business wanting to help people. The way that you will make it in the business is by having an attitude of helping, and to remember, every person you help is going to help your family as well. I think when we go in it as a lucrative off the bat, our perspective gets out of whack. When our perspective gets out of whack, then right up here between our two ears gets out of whack. And that's when more pressure comes. That's when we get down. That's when we get depressed. I often tell people, you are your own worst enemy. And I fully agree with that, myself included, because the thoughts we dream up can make us or break us, literally. So I think as we go through, we need to know that our job is to help and provide value to each of our clients. Now, does providing value equal a sale? No, it doesn't. Providing value could be something as simple as me looking at Miss Jones's policy and telling her, hey, Miss Jones, you are in great shape. Now, if you'd like to add some to it, you've got a really strong policy here, I can do that for you. And then I'd give her some examples. But sometimes we walk away from people's houses and we've still created value. Now, as we create that value, we need to learn to do something else, and that's ask for referrals. Because that's the way I mediate my value business, is by asking for referrals. Because referrals, 9 times out of 10, are going to return me money in my bank account. So the third reason that I
Hey, Dave,
haven't, yes,
let me jump in here, my friend, because
go ahead.
those top two topics are extremely important for agents. And I got a few things that kind of popped into my mind that I wanted to throw on top of it. Right. And so just so that way everybody's clear here in the room, obviously, Mr. Heath is our coach here in our program with years. It almost feels like a lifetime worth of knowledge and experience, especially with all the agents that you work with. And I'm just a rookie agent, right? I'm just one man speaking from my own personal experience. But here's what I'll tell you, back to number one, the work, right? A lot of people come into this business just expecting it to be easy and to make a lot of money. And the second part is true. You can definitely make a lot of money, but man, let me tell you, you better be prepared to work, because the way that I would summarize it is the results or the profit, the dollars that you gain out of this business are a direct result of the amount of leads you purchase and work that you put into the business. Put those two things together, and that's the equation to success, right? If you're not buying enough leads, not getting enough in front of enough people, having enough presentations, or if you're buying old age leads that have been beat up, right? If you don't have fresh and exclusive leads and plenty of them, you're going to really set yourself up for failure, right? And that would be one of the reasons what we're talking about as far as work goes, right? And we'll get into leads in a minute, but really being prepared to put the work in. And what I want to tell folks is, because I talk to a lot of new agents that are interested in looking at the DIG agency and never sold final expense or any insurance for that matter, or sold anything, period. And really the way that I describe people, I tell them our typical results for people in our agency as independent broker, on average, can expect a take-home income between $50,000 to maybe $75,000 or up to $100,000 in the first year. Take home. If you follow the steps that we recommend, if you buy the leads in the order that we recommend, that's the average result, right? Now, does everybody hit that number? Obviously not. I can't obviously guarantee to anybody's success. There's certainly people that hit below that number, but there are certainly people that hit above that number, people that are making, six figures and beyond in their first year. And what are they doing in order to hit that? And I got to tell you, David, you already know the answer, is putting in the work, right? It's not some secret sauce that they have. They're not just this overly exceptional salesperson. They're just literally putting in the work, doing the door knocks, doing the phone calls, or the actual work necessary to be successful. So I just wanted to throw that on top of your first point there. And on the second point, as far as perspective goes, the thing that I'd like to add on top of there is you kind of have to insulate your emotions from the business, right? Because it's very easy when you're sucking out there and you're getting door after door slammed in your face, or nobody's picking up the phone, or they're hanging up immediately once they hear your voice, right? Those days will happen. They are coming. I promise you, if you're going to do this business long enough, you will run into that. The other thing is, you're going to have some super awesome killer days out there as well, right? Where you're making 4 sales off a single lead in a single house, right? Like that happens for sure. So what you'll have to do is be able to insulate yourself from those emotions, both the highs and the lows. You can't get too high in your highs. You can't allow yourself to get too low in your lows. You just have to be consistent in maintaining that perspective that Mr. Heath was talking about. Sorry to jump in on you there, David, but if you want to circle on those two, or if you got more to add on.
No, that pretty well sums them up. And of course, the third reason we've already alluded to is not having the right kind of lead to start with, and not having enough of that kind of lead. So here at the DIG Agency, we only use and recommend our preferred vendors. Why we do that is because there's so many vendors out there and so many places you can put your money, and not all of them are good. These that we have are time tested. We've kind of put the rubber stamp on them as far as approval with them. And we also have within our program, depending on how much business you want to write each week, is going to determine how many leads you need to buy, how active you need to be. But I think a lot of people just come into the business and think, well, as long as I can talk to someone. Yeah, that's fine. It's good to be talking to people. You need to be talking to people. And I would never recommend for you not just to walk up somebody literally on the street and ask them, hey, what are you doing for your final expenses? It's honestly your job to do that, in my opinion. But if you have leads that are directed concisely to the individuals that we want to talk to, the individuals that are proven to have more of a need for what we're offering them, then your results are going to be better, but they're also going to be quicker. I think a lot of times people coming in the business, if you're stubborn and hard-headed, you're going to find your way and you're going to figure it out on your own. But at the end of that year, how much money did you waste trying to find that way? Or if you're the opposite of that person, 2 to 3 weeks of rejection could be enough to put you out of the business. And it could go directly to the type of leads you were using, the quantity of leads you were purchasing. And the last part is, how many touches are you doing on those leads? So all of this has to be figured into an equation. And like I said, on the leads, that's the main reason we have the program that we have, is to make a concise road for you to go to, and where you need to stop along the way, who you need to purchase from. I'm sure there's good lead vendors outside of who we recommend. We haven't used them. We don't want to recommend anything that we are not that we're not haven't used, because at that point we'd be telling you something that we weren't fully aware of. So these are tried and true. JD, what's your take on that?
No, I totally agree as far as the leads go. There's a lot of agents as far as the pitfall of leads goes. Here's what I've seen most commonly, David. And this is both in our agency and from other agents that I've seen coming to our agency, is that what happens is you get people that get some marginal bit of success. They make a few sales here and there and they get the ball kind of rolling. But for some reason, they decide, and I'm sure Mr. Heath is gritting here because I've been guilty of this myself. They get the bright idea, to start messing with their leads, right? Whatever they were doing was working. They're like, oh, I'm smarter than this. I've got this other method or technique or lead vendor that I want to use instead. And oftentimes what will happen is it's usually a cheap lead, right? They think like, oh man, I'm tired of paying X dollars per lead over here for these direct mail or whatever they may be. And they're like, oh man, these other cheap leads right here, man, they're less than $10 a piece. All I have to do is make 1 or 2 sales and I'm good, right? And so that's a common pitfall. I've seen people just buying the wrong leads or screwing up their lead flow, not ordering their leads in time. And that ultimately leads to their failure. So 100% agree on that pitfall. The other thing that I'll mention, folks, if you are live here on YouTube or here in the Zoom room, feel free to post a question here for either myself or Mr. Heath to answer. We're going to be running hopefully maybe about 30, 45 minutes of the show total. So again, if you got a question, post it in the bottom. We will make sure that we get to every question before we wrap things up here for today. And just for fun, if you want, throw in the chat, tell me where you guys are joining us from. I see you in the audience there, Mr. Sorrentino, and thank you for joining us. Oh, by the way, Dave, Mr. Sorrentino says, I want to highlight the remarkable salesmanship of David Heath. Pay close attention to his advice. It will benefit you. Just want to mention that.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you there, man. Checks
in the mail. All right. So following up from there, Dave, where do you want to go? What is another common reason folks fail?
I think even if you have good leads, what about being thin-skinned? Okay, and what do I mean by thin-skinned? That means not having thick skin. We can have the right leads, we can have the right everything, and walk away too quick or get our feelings hurt. We have to understand that we are in a business of no's, and that's great because we like to hear no. I tell our group all the time, a no is one step closer to a yes, and we're looking for yeses as we go out and about. So we have to get thick skin. Now, how do we do that? Well, practice makes perfect, right? We go out the first little bit and we literally feel like we get our nose bloodied. We're getting beat up, we're fatigued, we're struggling, right? A lot of the times it's because at the door, we're just saying, oh, you're busy? Okay, I'm sorry. Let me get in my car and drive 45 minutes back home. No, we don't say that. We let them know, hey, I've driven here, 45 minutes. I'm here now. It won't take long to go over the information that you requested. Do you want to sit out here on the porch or go in the house? And as they come back with other objections, we have to come back with rebuttals, because it is our job to deliver and go over the information that they requested. And I think a lot of times it's hard to teach this, I'm sure, like anything, it can be taught, but it's difficult to teach it because we have to basically get beat up enough that we say, I'm not going to put up with that anymore. I'm not going to let that bother me anymore. This person is requesting my expertise, is the way I look at it when I get a lead card back. They want my expertise. My job is to go and give them my expertise. So we have to build up that skin. We have to make sure we're not taking no. I don't want to quote because I can't remember the exact statistics, but there's a statistic out there of how many no's you'll get from a person before you'll turn them to a yes if they're not a buyer. So that just lets me know that they may tell me no today. They may tell me no next week. They may tell me no next month. 2 months from now, they may finally be ready to say yes. So we have to have thick skin to go back and see somebody who's given us 3 no's a 4th time, right? Now I do know average on touches is it often takes 7 touches for them to become a client. So we know we've got to get through no's, right? We can't be thin skinned. We have to be thick skinned to be able to do that. What's your thoughts on that, JD?
Yeah, David, 100%. And I have heard you and David DeFord both say in a number of instances, the folks that are successful and are like killing it at this business, they're not doing so much better for than you because they're getting so many more yeses. And by the way, they're getting more yeses, but they're getting a massively larger amount of no's than you. It's not that they turn more people from a no to a yes. It's just that they get in front of more people. And so what am I trying to say here? If you want to be successful in this business, you better get used to hearing the no's, because if you want to try to sell 10 policies or more a week, guess how many no's that is? Like you probably bought 40 or 50 leads. And guess what? You probably door knocked them maybe 2 or 3 times each. So you do the math on how many no's that is compared to the yeses, right? And that's what Mr. Heath means as far as being thin skinned. Like you've got to have really that kind of encompasses almost everything we've covered here, like having the right perspective, enough leads, and then not being thin skinned, right? But just prepare yourself mentally to hear those no's in order to get to the yeses.
Yep. The 5th thing that we've got here is going to be they don't have a professional mentor. And I'm learning more and more and more how important this is. As I'm helping people through the process, I was fortunate. I had a gentleman that kind of took me under his wing, and he kind of showed me the ropes. Now, I'd been struggling up until that point, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I was doing everything we have said so far to do. I was not doing what I was not supposed to do in my eyes. I was doing the activity. I was ordering from the right lead vendor. I was ordering enough leads. I'd gotten no so much, I had no choice but to have thick skin by this point. But I didn't know the niches of the craft, basically. And that's where the mentor is going to really help you out. They're going to actually be able to listen to what you're saying. And from a unbiased third party, basically, they can give recommendations on that. A mentor can help you with lead vendors if you're struggling with that, with demographics of where you need to do your lead campaigns. But I think the biggest part is just having someone that you know has knowledge and that you can rely on. And of course, as we promote, be a phone call away, because none of this matters if you can't get in touch with that person while you're in the moment. As we know, being in the house, being on the phone, however you're selling, there's a moment. And if that moment leaves, we're left behind at that point. We have to react quickly. And The knowledge that a mentor will give you to start with, starting out in the business, is going to give you a jump start because you're going to be ahead of others already. But then having that expertise when you're in the field, when you have a question, to get it right then, it really helps. And I've noticed another thing that I tell all of my agents this also. Sometimes just hearing the same sentence from another person is enough to go ahead and flip the scale. And it's true. If they're in a house, they're struggling with somebody. Hey, let me call a friend of mine in the business. He's very knowledgeable. Let's get his perception on this. Well, if you're in my group and I've trained you and you listened, then our perspective is going to be the same. So as you call me, I don't have to know what you told them. I know what you should have told them, and that's what I'm going to tell them. And when those two align, oftentimes it's like something magical happens for the client. That, okay, that's all I needed. Or they may just want to ask me a question and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or you're having trouble closing them, and I just need to ask them a question. Hey, Miss Jones, from a non-biased third party out here, David Heath, what's your problem with the policy? What do you not like about it? And let's get what they don't like out first, because we can combat that. And then let's focus on what they do like. And then we'll put them a plan together that's going to work for them. So I think everyone nowadays in this competitive market, I really believe you need a professional mentor. And if I was starting in the business, I know I'd have one, for sure.
Excellent. And I've actually got an interesting comment that I want to throw at you, Dave, as far as mentors go. But before we get there, I just want to make sure we're covering the folks in the live chat here on YouTube. I wanted to say welcome to being here to Mr. Kevin Hawthorne. I think he's a regular on the show. I appreciate you being here, joining us from Lakeland, Florida. Fantastic. And again, thank you for being here. You know what? Let's throw some Q&As as we go along, David, if you're okay with it. First question I've got from you for Mr. Brandon De La Pena. He says, when do you feel someone is ready to transition from strictly final expense to both final expense and Medicare? Do you want to jump on that one?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to jump on that one. No time soon, Brandon. And Brandon, I see you out there on your post, man. My personal opinion, you need to build your final expense business up strong first, and then utilize that business for Medicare. There's a lot of rules and regulations on Medicare. The way to trump that business, those rules and regulations, is by having a business relationship already with this individual. If they're my client on my book, we have a business relationship. But I really do feel that, and if you'll look it up in our 5-year plan, it is on down the road a little bit. It's not right off the bat. And I'm glad you're asking this, because that's the next thing we're going to talk about as far as why people fail. So
okay, hold on.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Good.
Yeah, that's the next one.
And Brandon, I would try to throw in there as well, kind of what Mr. Heath is saying. I mean, typically we tell most agents, give it about 6 to 12 months, really master final expense first. Now, there could be some caveats or exceptions to that, right? Like if you came over to us and you were primarily selling Medicare somewhere else, if you have a lot of extensive experience in doing so, maybe 3 to 6 months of selling final expense might be a recipe, but man, at a minimum, give it 3 to 6 months, right? And really, if for folks that don't know, as far as Medicare goes, like why that's important here, final expense and Medicare kind of go together like peanut butter and jelly, right? Because final expense is going to pay you a lot of money up front, commission-wise, very first year heavy as far as commission goes. And then very little on the residuals though, right? Almost next to nothing. It's going to take 5 or 10 years before you get a decent residual in final expense. Conversely, Medicare pays much less upfront, but a better building residual, right? And so that's kind of how you look at it. So if anybody's interested, why would somebody want to do that? The other thing, Dave, I forgot to cover having no mentor. Here's the bomb that I want to drop on you. I would almost go so far as to say, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that your personal mentor in the business may be as important, if not more important, than the agency that you choose to go work for. Would you agree with that?
I do agree. I do. You can be with a company that's not the best, but if you've got the best mentor for you, I think it outweighs it. I really do, because they've gone through the ups and downs. You can talk to them about things and they can relate, because when folks tell me, JD, hey, I'm ready to quit. Yeah, I've said that 500 times. Me too. You want to quit together? Let's do it. Then let's start again tomorrow morning like professionals do. But yeah, I get it, because I felt the pain. I still feel the pain, and it never leaves. It's just you get thick skin to it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that might be more important at times.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that thought, and again, Dave, because you've got more experience and you understand, you know more agencies and folks than I do. But the reason why I say that too is because you could be in a situation where you're at an agency. Let's be honest, most of the time it's going to be an MLM style of agency. And the reason why people fail in those type of situations is because they lack mentorship. I mean, of all the reasons we talked about, but specifically speaking to mentorship, because here's what happens, right? You get coached or brought in or recruited in to join their program. And then from day one, they're like, hey man, who else can you get in here? Let's recruit more people. And then 2 weeks later, you get your best friend from, your job at the electric company to come work with you. And now you're responsible for training this person for them to be successful. Like you're their direct upline. And it's like, what value could you possibly provide when you've barely even gotten to the door yourself, right? And so in that situation, you can see how that would set yourself up for failure, right? As opposed to, by the way, with our program, all of our coaches, just being 100% transparent, are put on a salary. They're no longer required to go out into the field to produce personal production in order to have enough to put food on the table, in other words, right? And so why is that important? Because let me tell you, if your coach or mentor is dependent upon his own personal production in order to feed his family, well, let me tell you, that's going to be their first priority, and helping you is probably going to be second priority. And that's exactly the reason why we've put our coaches in this position in our program, is so they can focus 100% on making sure that you are successful, right? So where did we leave off? So, question, as we covered the Medicare question, let me jump back into the questions, and we're going to keep it a little bit short today. Dave, I think we'll cover one more topic here. Let me grab the questions in the chat here real quick before we go any further. Charles Robinson asked, what is the best approach to offer final expense? That kind of maybe a open-ended, I'm not sure. It's not a very specific question, but Dave, how would you like
that's not the best. I'm not sure what you're meaning there, Charles. I'll tell you the best way for me to offer it is by knocking on the door and sitting down in person with them. I don't know if that's where you're going at with that, if you're going face to face versus telesales. It differs between individuals. But for me and my personality, I'm better face to face. I've done both and I've been successful in both. I get more joy out of doing it face to face. And I don't like, personally, me just sitting there on the phone all day. I like to get out and talk to people, breathe fresh air, have a good time. And I apologize if that's not the direction you were going with that question.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in, Charles, and go into detail in case
if you want to elaborate.
Exactly. Jacob Wordhouse asked, what's your opinion on insert MLM company here, if any? So Jacob, if you'd like to speak to me specifically, contact me directly. The link's in the description. I'll be happy to talk to you on a one-on-one basis. We don't like to talk negatively any towards one specific agency here. That's not what we're here for. But I will tell you that if you are at an MLM, any of them, you're at a very big disadvantage. I'll just answer it like that.
Yeah. I'll touch one thing on that, JD, that I don't think is negative. You've got a very tall structure there that you have to feed off your sales. And that means your hierarchy. So that means they're going to compress your upfront commissions, your total commissions, to feed that upline. That's the only negative, if you call it a negative, because I've worked with LMs and done just fine. But I could have made a lot more money brokering. But there's good companies out there, and we don't want to bash anyone.
Exactly. Let's see here. Christian Woodmore says they wind up messing up the leads and messing with the script, and then all of a sudden nothing resembles what created the success. So essentially what he's saying here, more of a comment than a question, I'd say, that folks that have been in some period of time, new or otherwise, have a tendency to mess with what's working, right? They jack with their leads, or they kind of get a little loose off the script and then have to find their way back to what got them success to begin with. Can you speak specifically to that, David?
Well, JD, I was going to ask you if that sounded familiar.
100%. Yeah, I'm guilty of that for sure.
We all do it. We all do it. We think that we know more sometimes, or we think it sounds better, or we think it will. The problem is I think in all those scenarios, don't mess with something that's working ever. Let it run its course. As long as my vehicle just needs the oil change, tires are good, it's running good, why would I go in there and start unbolting the motor? I kind of look at it that way. So, but yes, and I'll be honest with you, I think most new people do this. And my key is, with me mentoring them, is to catch them doing it and real quick and say, hey, why are you doing that? And they'll tell me why they're doing it. And I'll say, how's it working? Oh, it's horrible. Okay. So sometimes we have to prove to ourselves, unfortunately, and I've done that before myself. But I would highly advise, just stick to the program. As you grow in this business, you can elaborate on things. You can add things in there. You can make it more you. But at first, a good script, I think, is the best way to go, just to keep you confident, because you know it's good and you can be confident and stand behind it.
100%. Yeah, we've all been guilty of that. And in fact, anybody who knows, not to throw him under the bus when he's not in the room, but David DeFord's story, he's failed out, right? And he's openly told that story in the past. I'm only vaguely familiar. I'm speaking for him, right? But the reason he cited for failure, from what I remember, is because he started messing around with what was working, thinking that he was smarter than whatever it was and trying to change or adapt things in his own form, fashion, or his own way of doing things. And that didn't work out, right? And if somebody like Mr. DeFord could succumb to that, obviously any of us would be a victim, possibly, if we were to go down that path. So let's see here. Our following question here, Mr. Heath. I've got tips on handling chargebacks. What are your thoughts on handling chargebacks?
Well, always reach out to them, first of all. If you don't, you've given up, and just pay the money back. You must have plenty of money to do that if you're not going to follow back up with them, the way I look at it. But follow back up with them. My motto has always been write 3 for every one. Now, what do I mean by that? That means if I write 1 policy today, I've got to go write 2 more. Why is that? One's not going to pay, one's going to cancel, and one's going to stay on the books. That's not proven to be true. That has just always been my thought process. But what does that keep me doing by keeping that thought process? It keeps me active and it keeps me hungry. So I'm constantly excited, not because I wrote a policy, but because I've got to get my rear in gear and write 2 more. But I contact my chargebacks because I want to make sure that it wasn't a mistake on my end, first of all. A lot of the chargebacks that we're seeing on the first month, the payment could be an error that the agent made, putting in the, me included, Putting in one wrong number will mess a bank account up. One number too many, one number too less, or just one incorrect number. So first of all, we want to reach out to them just to grab that low hanging fruit because it's coming back on the books. Okay. Now, when we get into folks that can't afford it at that time, hey, just bite the bullet, go back and see them later on. If they're that cash strapped. The one thing I do see people often do too is spend too much time on chargebacks when you could just be out there writing policies to cover those chargebacks. So there's a fine line between not enough, and too much on that. But you'll kind of have to draw your own line in the sand for that.
Yeah, 100%. And to add on top of that, Brandon, I got to tell you, in my personal opinion, chargebacks are my least favorite part of the business, to be 100% honest with you. And I've had this conversation countless times with Mr. Heath as far as how to handle chargebacks. And I've heard the right three for every one. And it still makes me feel like reminds me of what it was like being in the field and hearing that from you, man. I hated hearing that, to be honest with you. But truthfully, it is quite true, right? You can't count on all of your businesses to stick on the books. It's just not realistic. Now, as far as chargebacks go, though, there are some things that you can do in order to minimize, like to get ahead of your chargebacks to even begin with, right? And making sure that, I think one of the most important things, David, is probably telling them, or when you're in the presentation, selling them on the why, finding out what their reason is, why they requested the information, why is this important to you? Like, if you could really make that stick in their head, then when it comes time for them to make that monthly bill, that payment for you, that reason hopefully would be reminded to them of the reason why they put it there, to protect their family, right? And so that's one way to get ahead of it. Another way to get ahead of it is not overselling somebody, right? Not trying to sell them more. Like, if you know that their monthly income is $700 a month, like, you probably don't want to sell them a $150 policy, right? Even though it may sound good that they want to sign up for it, sometimes with these folks, you have to be more accountable with their budget than they possibly may be, right? And so again, staying ahead of it is another thing. And one thing that Mr. Heath may or may not agree to is I believe in automations and software. I'm a big, strong believer in that. Mr. Heath may be a little bit old school, but there are automations and software available for CRMs to where if somebody were to miss a payment or lapse in coverage, that it automatically will send them some text messages, some emails, send you a to-do, so that way you remember it. Like, that was my biggest struggle being in the field, just remembering or making time to follow up with these people, right? But when it boils down to it, when you got and a good mentor friend of mine in the business, Gatlin, had always told me, if I've got fresh leads and I've got lapse people to see, I'm always going to go leads over lapses. That was kind of what stuck in my head, right? So just staying busy and writing policies and just to cover up those is typically one of the best ways to handle it.
I tell you one other thing that I do at the end of my presentation, I kind of set them up for them not paying. I'll say, hey, anything ever comes up where you can't afford this for some reason to make your payment, don't you call the insurance company, call me. Because I want them to reach out, because oftentimes if they haven't made a payment yet into their plan, we can push them back a little bit. So, and I do often have people call, hey, it's just not going to be good to start this month like I thought. Now, if I didn't tell them to call me, they just wouldn't pay. Then it'd go a mark against them. But if I can call the carrier and work out an extension for them. So always let them know to reach out to you if there's any problem with making a payment.
100%. And make sure, if you have an admin day or a few hours a week that you use for admin purposes, open up your dadgum emails. I don't. I'm guilty. I've got over 1,000 in my inbox that I haven't kept up with. But guess what? There are policies in there, notifications that I've received from carriers, from policies that I literally wrote the bank information down wrong, so their first payment didn't go through, and then they're getting notices from the carriers all like, hey, you owe us $300, and like, wait, that's not right. My policy was $96 or whatever. Like, and they don't understand the $300 because you haven't paid the other 3 months worth, right? And so, man, that is just such an easy way to fix something that you would hate to lose a client that way just because you made a small like accounting or administrative error typing their bank information. And even if you got them on the phone, they're like, no, that's fine. I just verify the information and they'll get right back on the books, right? That's an easy one to save there. And Mr. Heath, I'll tell you, we're already kind of wrapping up where we wanted to hit as far as our time frame. So all the rest of the remaining topics we had to cover on this show, we're going to table them. Post a comment in the comment box if you'd like to see the rest of the remaining topics that Mr. Heath was going to share with us today. And before we close up, let me grab a last couple questions here, and then I'll let you get out of here for the day, Mr. Heath. Let's take a look here. Thank you for being here, Gatlin. Appreciate that. And best CRM for face-to-face. And it says, I'm trying Radius right now and it's okay. I'll answer real quick and then I'll let David answer. There's several good CRMs out there. I mean, almost all of them nowadays are really great. You'll just have to pick which user interface works best for you. But to be quite honest, for the first almost year of me being in the business, I literally just use Google Sheets. And like I mentioned, I love software. I love automations. I love all that stuff. But because I was so busy selling, like I didn't even let that warrior get in my way. I just went with the literally the lead sheet, the Google Sheet spreadsheet that came from the lead vendor. That's what I used. Heath, what do you think?
Yes. Do something that's not very expensive at first. I've never used a CRM. I've used spreadsheets. And I'm not totally against technology, but what I do instead, I personally text them myself, and then I pay someone to send out my mail. So I will send thank you cards, I'll even send a card that your payment is lapsed if I can't get them on the phone. I go snail mail still. Haven't quite gone over to the quicker mail, but snail mail works very good. If it's hand addressed, I generally do that for that. But just find you something that's going to work for you at first on your CRM. Don't throw a lot of money into it at first, especially face to face, because we don't need all the automations at first. We can make a living without them. Now on the telesale side, that may be a different story. But at first, get something simple that you can handle. And Brandon, since I didn't answer your question totally, I was going to put it on my next reason. People fail 12 months, man. 12 months before I do any Medicare. That's my opinion. But yeah, it's been a great show, man. It went fast.
Yeah, man. Thank you again for being here. I hope you guys enjoyed this format. And one last tip that was thrown in the chat here from Mr. Gatlin, and it's not what you sell, it's what you keep. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that phrase from my good friend, but 100% is true, right? It's keeping those folks on the books and making those sales. And, that's how you're going to survive or not in this business. But again, thank you guys so much for being here. It went by super fast. I've got to let Mr. Heath go. He's got a lot of other important coaching things that he's got to get to this afternoon. It's Monday. Mondays are obviously always busy for everybody, but thank you guys again for being here. I hope your team does great on Monday Night Football if you're doing that, or I hope to see you guys back here next week. And Mr. Heath, thank you once again for being here, my friend.
All right. See y'all later.
All right. And if you guys are interested in learning more about the DeFord Insurance Group, make sure you check the information in the description box below. We've got tons of free resources. Make sure you join our Insurance Sales Success Group, where we got tons of scripts and training and videos and books and all kinds of free stuff, whether you're contracted with us or not. This is just something we put out for free. We believe in just what is the phrase I'm looking for here, David? Just providing value up front.
We believe if we provide value, it's going to come back to us.
Excellent. Exactly. All right. And thank you guys again for being here. I will see you guys next week on Monday. If you're not there already, we will be in LA this week on the DIG Agency Roadshow. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check the link in the descriptions. We are coming to a city near you. We've got 4, 5, 6 more cities left between now and the end of the year. Mr. Heath and I will both be at some of these events. So we're looking forward to meeting you folks, all of you folks at this free event. Again, details in the description box. Thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you guys next week.